So tonight's event is with our Canadian client Shopify in partnership with the Government of Canada's Trade Commissioner Service and Shopify's key marketing agency here in the UK Eastside. I'd like to welcome everyone this evening to Canada House. My name is Andrew Smith. I'm the Minister-Counsellor for the Commercial and Economic section here at the High Commission of Canada in the UK. I've recently arrived here in London a couple of months ago. I had spent 4 years in New Delhi at our High Commission there, and then the previous experience has been throughout Asia. We're excited to be partnering here in the UK with Shopify, one of our technology companies from Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. And with that, I'd like to highlight Province of Ontario's Agent General, who's with us tonight, Miss Sophia. She's over here. Thank you. Shopify specializes in software related to e-commerce management and has, over the last 3 years, seen significant growth here in the UK and across Europe. Shopify is one of the, what we estimate to be 150 Canadian technology companies who are here in the UK to build, grow, and serve their clients. So I'd like to welcome tonight Shopify's clients, suppliers, and partners. Our speakers today include Shimona Mehta, Shopify's Managing Director, and Stephen Bartlett, whom I'm sure many of you will recognize for his marketing and investor expertise. So we look forward to this showcase and hearing what's new from Shopify and its technology solutions for these times. And these are turbulent economic times. As I've said, I've been here 2 months and I've had 2 monarchs and 3 prime ministers already. But Shopify is a success story of growth for Canada. As a former business owner myself, what attracts me to the company is they serve large retailers, yes, but it's the service they give to the small and medium-sized enterprises with the e-commerce tools that they need to survive. They are a business enabler. Merchants on Shopify's platform have sold more than $25 billion worth of goods and services in 2021 outside of their home countries. And small businesses produce nearly half of those export sales. But let me give you one personal anecdote on the impact of Shopify. As I said, I was in New Delhi for 4 years, and we endured the COVID pandemic in India. It was repeated wave after wave of COVID. We were in a national strict lockdown for 4 months where you could not leave your apartment. And in the depths of despair of the pandemic, Canada, like the UK, donated medical supplies to the Indian Red Cross, and I can tell you firsthand these were well used. But what it meant for Indian retailers was equally punishing. But there was one small SME that I will highlight. It was 2 women-owned manufacturer and retailer of glass and pottery for kitchenware. They also employed a number of Indian women who may otherwise not have had jobs. And during the pandemic, the company had suffered significantly. And during this period, they were approaching bankruptcy. The 2 women refinanced their homes to keep their company afloat. And then they met Shopify. And today their fortunes have reversed. In fact, before I left, we had the International Trade Minister for Canada, the Honorable Mary Ng, visit Delhi. And the Shopify India Managing Director and I took her to meet the 2 women who had this business and took her to meet the women who are still employed by this company and to hear their stories firsthand. And I think the figure they gave was their sales revenue now are 12 times larger on the Shopify platform than when they had a storefront presence. So in addition to being a business enabler, Shopify is also a gender enabler. And what I mean by that, in some markets, women business people and entrepreneurs find it difficult to access liquidity, find it difficult to get loans. Shopify helps them get around those gender impediments. In Canada, in the midst of the pandemic, Minister Ng also launched Go Digital Canada. And this was to help Canadian businesses get online quickly because of the pandemic. So they had to adapt to the digital economy. And to do that, Canada also partnered with Shopify. So our team here tonight, led by Sanjay, but also Michael and Vanessa in the back and Jennifer, we were delighted when Shopify requested our involvement for this event because we know they can make a difference. And this event took considerable planning and coordination. So to bring these elements together, I'd like to applaud both Shopify and Eastside and our team at the High Commission for tonight's event. And with that, it's my pleasure to turn it over to Louis Thompson, the Chief Marketing Officer at Eastside, to say a bit more about tonight's event. So sit back and enjoy. I think you're going to hear some fascinating things. Louis?
Thank you. Thank you so much. I mean, first of all, I'm very flattered that you've all come to see me specifically, but if at all possible, if you do see Stephen throughout, if you could make him feel welcome as well, because I don't want it to be all about me. We've got an amazing panel of, I want to say judges, but it's not quite that. We've got an amazing panel today. Big thanks to SellersFunding for helping us put this event on. And we've got Leo from SellersFunding, Paul from Ernst Young, Shimona from Shopify, Jason joining me from Eastside Co, and of course, Stephen Bartlett from all companies, I believe. It deserves a round of applause. We're so excited. The focus of the debate today is going to be about helping businesses like yourselves thrive through what I'm sure you will see as economic uncertainty. And that's going to be the focus today. So I want to start, and I'm going to start with you, Stephen, because I'm sure everyone's keen to hear from you. What does the next 12 months look like in terms of the economy? Or even the next couple of weeks, maybe?
First of all, thank you for the introduction. Very overwhelming. You probably saw me like squirming in my chair. But thank you also for the hospitality. This place is incredible. I feel like a royal. I definitely didn't dress correctly to be here, but yeah, thank you. The next 12 months, a tremendous amount of uncertainty, and that's an uncontrollable in my life. With all the different companies I'm involved in, whether it's Huel or whether it's my own companies in different industries, Web3, marketing, whatever it is. So we're playing defense a lot in our companies. We're playing as if the worst is going to happen, but at the same time, operating with a remarkable level of optimism. And that's the most important thing, I think. I tend to default, as you'll probably come to learn just in the time we're together this evening, I tend to think about mindsets and cultures of teams. And the most important thing for me is that we are proactive and optimistic, regardless of the world burning around us at times. And it does feel like that. You know, on Dragon's Den this year, when we shot my second season, the previous year, people were coming into the Den pitching their businesses. We saw 100 entrepreneurs, and they were talking to me about the iOS changes. That was the big thing that had kneecapped their businesses, right? So pitch after pitch, iOS has changed. My paid marketing isn't working the same way. I'm having trouble with attribution. This year, they came in talking about everything. It was the supply chain. It was currency, inflation, hiring people. It was this unbelievable perfect storm. And that is the macro backdrop that we're all having to operate in. And I come back to this point about optimism, which is what you can control. And when one door closes in life, another door opens somewhere. And the studies have been very clear that optimism isn't just a fluffy concept to keep you in high spirits. It completely changes the way a team and an individual behaves. You might have seen Darren Brown, who's coming on the podcast soon. I should have said that next week.
Do you have a podcast?
I have a podcast, yeah. But I remember maybe 10 years ago seeing a study he did where he took a group of people that are pessimists and he put money on their route to work on the floor. And he took a group of people that are optimists and put money on their route to floor. The optimists saw it and picked it up. The pessimists didn't even see it. And they've done this study with newspapers where they've put on one page of the newspaper, you've won £100, go over to the guy in the corner of the room and claim your £100. The pessimists didn't see it. They don't see it. You behave differently. So opportunity, optimism, regardless of a series of things that you cannot control. Yeah.
So, I mean, working from a place of abundance essentially is important. Leo, you're obviously working directly in financing businesses and supporting that. What are your thoughts in terms of the changes in how businesses are raising over the next 12 months? How are you seeing things going? What people are asking you about at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. First, I'd start off by saying I love and I agree with everything that Stephen had said. I think just mindset is so important for these businesses, especially as you head towards a downturn or uncertain times. The way I see it is, there's a turning point in the cycle right now. That's where we are, right? So we've had basically 12 years of low inflation, low interest rates, and steady growth. And that's just been flipped on its head. So now we're seeing high inflation, which has led to raising rates, which in turn has potentially led to slower growth, right, in the market. So I think it's no surprise that we're potentially probably headed towards a recession. I'll take a line out of Stephen's book where, I'm an optimist. I do think it'll be a relatively milder recession, especially if you compare it, you're benchmarking it, let's say, to the 2008 global financial crisis, right? There are so many other factors at play there. So if that's what you're using as your benchmark, I do think we're in much better shape. One interesting statistic that I saw that I think is relevant for everyone in this room is that so consumer balance sheets are actually much stronger now heading into this potential recession than they have been in previous recessions, right? So I think we do have a buffer there, right, as it relates to consumer spending. Now, where we are starting to see shifts in the market and clients that we're working with, I think most importantly is consumers are definitely going to be more mindful on how that hard-earned pound is going to be spent. So how can you position your business, right, and your brand and your product to be top of mind to them and be considered essential still, right, for that pound that they're going to be spending it on. So I think businesses that aren't static, right, can adapt, anticipate, and course correct with the changing market are the ones that are going to be successful in these uncertain times.
Brilliant, thank you. I mean, Jason, you're working with merchants day to day who are on the ground with Shopify stores, working in e-commerce. They've seen a massive boom over the last 2 years, and everyone's been kind of making the most of that. What's the difference in the questions that they're asking now, the concerns they have, the challenges that they're facing?
I mean, it's a multivariant problem, I guess, when it comes to opportunity, as you mentioned, but also what they're seeing when it comes to revenue, when it comes to conversion rate, when it comes to brand searches. There's reports out there that are saying, I think brand searches are down 13% this year. Conversion rates across the broad brush approach, but across the board, are down this year when it comes to people visiting a website and window shopping rather than committing to purchases. People, whilst the balance sheet, people's consumer index balance sheet is up, their cash flow isn't. They're being pinched all over the place at the moment. People's disposable income is being squeezed. The cost of living crisis is affecting how people view spending. Luxury goods are still, I think, doing very, very well. But other areas, other markets, other verticals aren't faring as well. People may consider not buying that sofa that they would have in the past. And that leads on to Made, if anybody has heard of Made.com, unfortunately looking like they're kind of going bust, I think, or haven't managed to find a buyer. So customers are coming to us with lots of different challenges. They've grown explosively over the pandemic period, and they've hired. They've built teams of people to support that growth. To support the need of the business at that point. And now they're in a situation where things are contracting, and they've got a big workforce. They've got a big payroll. They've got either investors that they've brought in at that point that they need to try and appease. So, it is tough out there at the moment for e-com businesses and e-com brands, whether they're sole owner, founder, or whether they're, managed from a financial point of view with investment or lending. They're being squeezed at the moment. Some of the best ones out there, they're learning how to navigate this by being good shopkeepers again, by being good retailers. It was quite easy over the pandemic to just throw products out there and people will come. Now you're having to be a bit strategic as to how you get your product in front of people, the purpose your product has, and the audience. People's purchasing behaviors change in a recession like this. People may be buying down. People that used to shop at Ocado might shop at Lidl now. So people's purchasing pattern changes, and there's opportunities, as Stephen was saying, optimistic opportunities for people that are willing to go out there and pivot their strategy and pivot what they're doing.
Shimona, how are you seeing? What's your kind of thoughts on how you're going to see consumer behaviour change? Because from my perspective, I'm seeing a lot of brands doing now, and throughout the pandemic, doing now what they should have been doing always, and they've been forced into a position where they have to do it.
Yeah.
Things like producing great content or, being a value-driven business. Do you think that consumer behaviour is changing, or do you think that brands are just being forced to do the things that they should have been doing anyway? How are you seeing consumer behaviour changing over the next couple of years?
Little of column A, little of column B. What we've seen, I think, particularly over the last couple of years, right? We saw this massive and intense shift to online, maybe a little artificially, right? And we all, I think, assumed that was it. This was the shift. The pandemic was the thing that really tipped us over fully into the online world. And of course, as we came out of the pandemic, what we've seen is a little bit of that return to store, right? Mm-hmm. What we saw as we came into this year particularly, right? You had merchants that were squeezed, from a supply chain side. They were squeezed, from the iOS and the ad buying side. And on the flip side, you've also had the share of wallet that was being split again, right? Consumers were going back to spending in restaurants, spending on holidays and other areas. And now we're getting that squeeze as we've just finished some research actually as we're looking towards the Black Friday holiday and the holiday season. And what we're seeing is consumers are saying that they're planning on spending as usual this Black Friday and holiday season, but in preparation to stop spending for next year. So it's almost like they're trying to go out with this big hurrah. And so when we see all of those things converge together, I'm super optimistic, actually, as Stephen is, but it's all about ensuring that you're really focused on doing the right things, right? There's going to be winners through this for sure. And so what we're starting to see is, the 2000s and up until then were all about brick and mortar and retailers and brands. And then the last decade's been about direct to consumer. What we're starting to see actually is like the growth patterns of both of those models are actually starting to converge. Mm-hmm. And what we're going to see moving forward for the next decade is what we're calling at Shopify connect to consumer, or C2C. Mm-hmm. This is about creating community and connection and deep relationships with your customers in order to make sure that you're building a deep connection, you're targeting them the right way, you're personalizing their experiences, as you were just talking about, right? Like, people want really great experiences. This is actually what luxury does well, right? They treat their customers like VIP. They know them deeply. They understand their journey across every channel. Yeah. Right, regardless of what it is. It isn't about one channel or another, and we're going to stop saying omni-channel soon. It's just retail everywhere.
I'm really looking forward to that.
Me too. But it's about making sure that we using data, we deeply understand our customer, we build deep relationships, we're building community, and we're holding on to them for life, right? So ensuring that you're taking care of those customers for a lifetime, because the world's gotten smaller with social commerce, right? Mm-hmm. People have choice outside of their high street now. They have choice outside of the borders. Mm-hmm. And as we heard before, for UK brands alone, a quarter of their business comes from outside of the UK. Yep. Right? People have the opportunity to shop globally, so you have to make sure that we're helping merchants to find customers, connect with them, and bring them into their doors over and over again.
Perfect. Paul, we're talking a lot about kind of connected consumers and the power of commerce, I suppose, to shrink the kind of globe, I suppose, and give people access to almost anything around the world. Is that something that you can relate to? Is that something that you would agree with?
Absolutely. I don't think it's about giving people access. It's about acknowledging they have access. Mm-hmm. So I think that we always talk about savvy shoppers, never as a shopper being savvier than now. I think that the information they get from looking at their TikTok feed, we've seen a massive TikTokification of retail recently, so they think they're being entertained, but really they're learning about products and experiences. So things like sports nutrition or beauty, they're almost as knowledgeable about the product and the ingredients of that product and the efficacy of it, of people in the stores selling it to them. So I think it's about understanding that these people need to be recognized and respected for what they want and what they need, and making sure that we can create experiences that are relevant to them, and make sure that we understand that no longer is it true that if you build it, they will come. Mm-hmm. Trust no longer comes from a brand. Trust comes from people's experience of that brand that's shared through their social network, where you can actually get trust secondhand, if you like, from the people that you do trust. And I think that organic adoption and recruitment is a far more subtle way and less commercial way of people coming into our ecosystems. And then, when they do feel the right time to actually be in a purchase funnel, because we can't make them be in a purchase funnel, we can do interesting things so that when they are, we can activate it. Our brand is top of mind for that particular experience.
Right. You talked a little bit when you were speaking, Stephen, about the rising cost for acquisition, this kind of perfect storm of things happening. This isn't a new pattern, right? We saw the same thing with Google. The cost per acquisition rose. Believe it or not, when lots of people buy a thing, the demand for that thing goes up and it costs more. The same thing happened on Facebook and Instagram. The cost per acquisition gone up for many reasons, but again, largely due to demand. TikTok has revealed itself as a platform. Do you think there's going to be a pattern here? Do you think that the cost of...
Right. You're totally right, and it's what I mean, it even happens within social networks themselves. So you'll have new features released. Instagram will come out with, what was one of the first real pioneer video came to Facebook. It used to be just on YouTube, then it came to Facebook at one point. And using video as an acquisition channel was cheap because Facebook were incentivizing you to make video. It's a new product. They always dangle the carrot a little bit. Then after about 6 months, the effectiveness of that feature within that platform decays. Then they come out with live streaming. And we were getting unbelievable returns from live streaming. 6 months later, that's gone. That pattern plays out within the networks themselves. Over on Instagram, when carousels came, my personal Instagram grew 300,000 followers in the 10 first posts I did on carousels. 6 months later, it's gone, the party's over. And that's happening within the platforms, but then it's happening platform to platform. And TikTok, interestingly, is the platform of the den this year. Honestly, it wasn't last year. The people were starting to struggle with iOS, and then this year it's like they found a solution, which was TikTok. The year before, I was hearing a lot of Snapchat as a real great acquisition channel, and we were seeing that a little bit, but now TikTok is the key shop in town. I think if you zoom out and go, okay, this cycle is going to continue to repeat itself, a brand new social network might emerge, they're going to have a ton of attention, and the newsfeed is still not going to be saturated yet with tons of user content, but also tons of ads. The ad products always take quite a while to mature, and that will infiltrate the feed, especially if they're a public company and they have to beat their earnings every quarter. They're going to have to pump more ads in. And if they can't find more real estate because there's not more people, then it means that your content, your organic reach is going to drop. The zoom out point here is how do if I built 1 million followers on Facebook 10 years ago, you can now reach 3 of them, right?
Those 3 people, hyper engaged.
Yeah, and it's just, but it's the facts, and it's kind of like a graveyard of social networks and audiences. So how do you create a system where you're moving those people from that top of the funnel social channel into a space that you own? And it's crazy because in the latter stage of my career in social media, what I started to see was newsletters come back in. Mm-hmm. In the first 5 years, I never just did a talk on stage to a CMO and told them to start a newsletter. There was one talk I did where I spoke about the Post. And I felt dirty doing it, but I was like, genuinely, these are unsaturated channels that are direct to consumer. SMS came back in a huge way. You've probably seen celebrities posting their phone number. Yep. Yeah, that's a platform called Community in San Francisco. But all of that happening, and then we've got these new platforms like Telegram and Discord and messaging. Basically, you need to have a direct relationship with your customer, and it's kind of what you were just saying there. So my TikTok following now, we're just about to hit roughly 1 million followers. The value I attribute to it is, I won't say 0, very, very low, because I know in 2 years' time, I won't be able to reach any of those people unless I move them out of there quick to somewhere that I can have a relationship with them, to some kind of newsletter, to some kind of private space. So that's what we're doing. I have a Discord, I have a Telegram, I have an email list, and I have my phone number channel.
Wait, that's not your...
No, that's sorry. Oh. I have my SMS, and that's what I'm thinking about. And it's community, it's direct, and yeah, it's personalized as it possibly can be. That's why I'm so bullish on Discord. I know there's skepticism, but skepticism doesn't mean anything. Skepticism for everything new.
I just was messing about with an app called Midjourney, which is an AI image generator, and they just hit something like over 1 million kind of Discord in a single server, and it's pretty phenomenal.
I'm so bullish about it. I always thought that the future of social networking would be quite sort of fragmented in a sense, where you'd have a social network for your dog, your village, your football team, your crypto project that you love, and it would probably exist in a decentralized way. That was always, many people forecasted this, and so when I look at Discord, and it's fairly decentralized as such, you download a little server thing onto your own computer, and then I can have these different channels down the side, and it's community-centric, and now it's programmable. It feels like it's going to not just be the future of workplace communications, but social communications, interest community. So I've got all of my team using it as our internal company chat, because if I think it's the future, I want my team to know what every button does. You know, so we use Discord for all of our companies, other than Huel.
I think there's you get them on it.
Yeah.
Are they using Slack?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I was going to say worse, but I won't say worse. They're using a different company.
Gosh, it's not Teams, is it? They're not on. Oh gosh. Everyone knows the dread of joining a Teams call, I'm sure. Sorry to anyone who's from Microsoft.
I love Microsoft.
So, I mean, interestingly, what we're really you're talking about building communities, which has been a staple of marketing forever. And we're talking about, essentially not building your house on rented land, not, the people who are dependent on organic reach on Facebook wholly failed. The people who are dependent on Instagram failed. If you don't own the data, you're going to struggle. I mean, to me, this just says, instead of working tactically, work strategically, right? I mean, Jace, what's your kind of view on that in terms of people moving from platform to platform? Is there a kind of more zoomed out way to look at that?
Yeah, there is. I mean, I'll give you an example of something that we're trying to be advising on kind of recently. It's a Canadian-based company, actually. They have recently launched they've got a Shopify site in the US, Shopify site in Canada, and the founder thought, right, okay, I want to generate more revenue, so I'm going to launch on Amazon. And in doing so, they've cannibalized the results for their own business and their own brand. Amazon now owns their branded search terms for a lot of their products, which they weren't even aware of. So they've given up a lot of power to some other, external channel that now owns the data, that owns the communication. She's given up a lot of power for the brand that she had with people doing brand searches. We see in the impressions, brand searches are still there, but the click-through rate has gone down massively.
And they
because
knock off our product.
And if it's successful, they knock off the product.
Recommends product.
It's so appealing, though, right, for a young merchant, because they see that as a volume play, right? And it's that immediate volume and cash flow that they're looking for.
Yeah, it's going after revenue. Yeah.
When we look at strategy, if you look at the kind of total customer journey, there's these different elements where people are searching for a solution to problem. They have a consideration of which merchant am I going to go with. Most merchants, and this will be true of some of the people in the room today, are just dealing right in the middle, right? They're always thinking, how do we make more sales now? Yes, we want to do the long-term stuff. We want to do the loyalty stuff. We want to do the retention stuff. But right now, what we need is more revenue. That's a really, really hard space to get out of. And I mean, Leo, you must see this all the time, and this must be a part of the reason that people come to you for kind of cash flow assistance, is that we just need to make that bit more money now, and then we can get to the other stuff.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think, we come across a lot of brands that, have so many great ideas, right? So many different ways that they can leverage the community that they've built, right? The audience that they have with their brands, but they just don't have the capital to do it, right? And so they're just kind of laser focused on what's in front of them. But so how are they able to, leverage the different resources and ideas that they have to, branch out, right? And I think this is where we come in, or funding partners, whether that be, on the equity side or the debt financing side, that can really make a difference, I think, for these businesses. I think to that point, what we're seeing in the market right now, which is super interesting, is, I'll let EY, Paul, touch on the equity side, because I'm sure you guys look at that a lot more than we do on our end. The only thing I'll say there, it's obviously the most expensive type of capital there is, right, for businesses. So I think timing for that is imperative, right? And so the current landscape may be a little tricky for that. So that leaves you with debt, right, in terms of just additional cash flow support for your business. And a couple of things that we're seeing in the market there now. Two things. I think one is that there is liquidity drying up in the market, not across the board, but certain segments of the market. And I think that's a function of two things. There's some players leaving the space, right, that are just struggling, closing the doors, just didn't work out, and just taking a step back. These are more the alternative lenders, specialty lenders across the space. And then if you take a look at your traditional lenders, right, i.e. banks, they're becoming a lot more stringent, right, and conservative in how they underwrite potential loans for businesses, right? Just given all the uncertainty in the market, taking a step back, maybe they don't have as much of the risk tolerance or risk appetite for this segment of the business. And even if they do, there's some sort of cap that they're now imposing on a lot of clients that they have existing relationships with, right? So that's one we're seeing. And then two, obviously cost of capital is going up significantly, right? As rates rise, that gets passed down to the business as well. So I'll be honest, it's become a more challenging environment from a capital standpoint for businesses now. That's not to say that there aren't, different types of capital options out there in the market, and I think that's why it's imperative for businesses to always keep that dialogue going, right? Just like if you're looking for your next round to raise equity, you're constantly speaking with investors, you should be doing the same on the financing, the debt side, right? Whether it's speaking with banks, whether it's speaking with alternative lenders, see what the options are, see what the market looks like for you, right? And then one hack or tip that I would give for folks here is, as you have those conversations, again, especially in this environment, if there is a credit facility offered to you and there's a rate that you can lock in now, even if you don't need the money, but you have access to it, you may need the money in 3 months' time, and the price of that may be higher, right, down the road. So if you have the ability and flexibility to lock that in, definitely advise doing so in this environment.
So, Paul, we're talking about essentially the fact that funding businesses may become more challenging, or the cost of debt may become higher. What are the kind of actionable things that, I'm sure there's many companies here that are bootstrapped and that they're building off their own profits rather than taking investment. What are the kind of actionable things that you think people can do within their own ecosystem that are going to support them through the next year? Who wins, basically?
Well, whoever's got cash in the bank is going to win and last the longest, but that's nothing you guys don't know. I think that one of the things that we often do is that we'll go into a company that might need some financial support, understand what they're doing well, what's their mission, what was their North Star, why did they do this in the first place, and then try to look for all the noise around that may be causing them to not perform. And then if they are going for funding, what are they going to do with the money? So if we get this injection of cash, what's our plan to transform and pivot our business so we're going to come out of this stronger? So what we often do is a light touch diagnosis of here we are with the business, what's the current state of that, what are your customers saying about your services rather than what you think that they'd like to say, and then what can we do to get a plan in place to get that North Star that might be 6, 9, 12 months, too far to get to maybe in some cases. So what are the small, incremental, quick wins we can deliver along the way to demonstrate that these self-funding interventions will get us to that North Star and transform the business? And that's what the lenders want to see.
Brilliant. Shimona, this is one for you. Do you think there is one of the big challenges that we see, certainly with the enterprise end of the scale, actually kind of mid to enterprise end of the scale, is this technical debt that these companies have built up, right? They've got ERPs, all sorts of acronyms all over the place, right? Costing them lots of money, various servers and whatever. Is there a company out there that can help reduce that technical debt? I mean, I'm leading to you there, I understand that, but I mean, as opposed to trying to make more money, we're seeing also companies trying to create efficiencies.
Yeah.
What's the kind of route to growth with that? How do you get to that point?
Yeah, I think it depends on maybe the size and complexity that they're starting from, right? So when I'm talking to businesses that are in a growth phase, they're potentially not too complex as yet, right? They don't have too many ERPs and CRMs and all the things that are plugged in as yet. It's easy for them to potentially just pick up and pivot everything, right? Like make a decision, go through the pain once. We can get you up and running on Shopify within weeks if you want to, right? And we can get you transactional and we can start to build on top of and ensure that you're thinking through your channels, you're focusing all the things with an amazing partner, in the right way. If you are a much more complex business, like the ones I think maybe you're talking about, like when I talk to, the IADS, all the department store, the chairs of all the department stores like Gallery and Corte Inglés and all of them, they have so much technical debt. Like their question actually is like, Shimona, where do we even start? Like I don't even know where to start. And actually I tell them to rewind a little bit and make sure they've got the right people on staff first. Are they actually ready for cultural, digital transformation? Do they have the right mindset to do this? And then let's start small. Start with something, right? And start to build in parallel, because that's a lot to undo and it can be really daunting. But what we've seen in the past, we've seen this over and over again, right? In the States and across Europe, where we see those that you can see it coming at the end of the road, with Bed Bath & Beyond, Sears, all of these that didn't do anything in time, and you could just see the runway running out for them. So at the very least, start now, right? Yeah. It's going to be a 10-year journey, but you have to start with something. right? So whether it's one brand or it's just a new channel that's not plugged into everything, and then you can start to kind of take apart the old and start to build with the new. Because everything I think that everyone here is talking about right now is the need to remain agile for the next decade, right? You don't know what the next channel or platform is going to be. You don't know what change is coming to iOS or whatever. We don't know what the economic landscape is going to look like. And so to be able to stay optimistic and know that you're going to be prepared for anything means to be agile. And you need a platform, you need tech that's going to be able to empower that.
I know Shimona said you should get you up and running on Shopify in a couple of weeks. I will just caveat that. So sometimes it takes a little bit longer.
I was going to say, we have a client here. We have a client here today, actually, that we got live in a few weeks. CareX.
Yeah, CareX we did. And
the team didn't
the team were all quite upset about it. But no, it's possible, but it's challenging. I suppose one of the interesting things that you mentioned there is that alongside the technical debt is a whole bunch of people whose roles and identity is absolutely tied up in the survival of that technical debt, right? So you build a whole IT infrastructure team, and you know, Stephen, as you built big businesses and built infrastructure around it, you must have seen this. How do you get to the point where everyone's rowing in the same direction, where the guy who's running the servers for your e-commerce store, and you say, well, we're moving to Shopify, how do you get that guy to make the right decision that moving that in that direction is the right thing to do for the business, even though it might not serve him directly?
Yeah, I think the biggest cost always when you're making big shifts in business, as I've seen over and over again, is a lack of conviction, not being 100%. I actually spoke to the head of Facebook, and she was telling me about Mark Zuckerberg, and she said there's key moments in Facebook's journey where they made big decisions, and she told me how they made them and also how they brought the whole company of Meta along with them. So the first big one was the move from desktop to mobile, right? They realized that they were late on mobile, Facebook, and they realized that they needed to bring the whole company with them. So Zuckerberg's stance in that situation was, he said, I'm no longer taking any meetings unless they're about mobile. And then he also spoke to the team about why mobile would be do or die for their business, and try to, which I think is the key thing, bring the team along with you in terms of inspiration. So you explain exactly why, and then you try and get them inspired about that particular future. And then again, they repeated the same thing with Meta, with the shift from being called Facebook to now being called Meta. Not taking any meetings on anything Facebook related, only taking meetings on Meta, changed the company's name. Started spending it's super high conviction, especially when your company's really big, because the inefficiencies that happen, the lack of motivation, the ambiguity can kill a company, slows it down. And you'll have people fighting in different directions. So I think conviction's number one. And then generally there's this broader point about just having a culture of change in your organization. And you know this in every organization. They have a culture of how they respond and feel about things changing. And it's very deep, it's very systemic. Yeah. Some companies, by design, have made change an exciting thing that everybody's rewarded to, incentivized, and promoted for seeking out. I actually think Social Chain is a really good example of that, where in the morning you got a text message at 9 a.m. about everything that had changed on all of the biggest social networks every day before work. What does that say before you've started your day? Here are the 10 things that have changed on Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, so that when you wake up in the morning and you have that meeting with Apple, who are one of our clients, you can walk in there and go, this changed this morning. But also, we promoted people on the basis of how much they changed. We measured the failure rate, which is, are we out-failing our competition? A key thing in macro uncertainty is like the rate in which your company is failing, I think, is maybe the single biggest predictor of your success. Are you failing faster? Especially, we talked about attribution. None of us know the right answers, right? But my team are going to get there before yours because we're going to out-fail you. We're going to fail 10 times this week, so we're going to be closer by the end of the week to the right answer. And that's the thing. No one's ever built your business in October 2022, face the challenges you're facing, so that the solutions are probably going to be discovered by first principle work and primary discovery, by failing yourself. And so I think about this a lot with my team. Some of them are here. It's this like, how do we accelerate how much we're failing? Every Monday, they send me a report on all the experiments we did in the last 7 days and how we measured it. I don't care. And my last point here is, how do you get an organization to really lean into failure? You look at the incentives of the organization. Like CEOs will stand there in front of their teams and say, innovate. And then you look at the incentives, it's clear. Everyone's incentivized to do their job.
Yeah, just execute.
Yeah, do exactly what you've been doing. It's just wishful thinking or words on the wall. But when you change the incentives and you change people's jobs and you start measuring different things, behavior starts to change. And in our organization, we measure the amount of experiments we do. Not the amount of success we've had, that's an output, I can't control it. The amount of experiments we do. We celebrate when the experiment's complete, not based on the outcome which none of us can control. And Amazon are the same. We talked about them a bit earlier. They had that one sentence when I was reading the Amazon book, it said, experimentation is our strategy, full stop. And from that has been born AWS, the Kindle, and all of these amazing things. There's a graveyard of 10x that amount of success stories, but it's defined them, and it's defined me, it's defined my companies, the podcast, it's defined everything I've ever touched in my life. It's just this getting the team to fail faster than the competition. Yeah. Really? Oh, thank you.
One of the things we talk about often at Shopify, this is a Toby Luca quote, our CEO and founder, is a failure is actually just the successful discovery of how not to do something.
I wrote this awful thing in my diary that I wasn't going to share with anyone until it sounded a bit like it made more sense.
Yeah.
But I'm going to try and say it out loud for the first time. I was like, this is what I do in my spare time, it's sad. I wrote, if failure is feedback, and feedback is knowledge, and knowledge is power, then failure is power.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense?
100%.
So I was like, failure is power. Not only is it empowering, but it's power because it's knowledge. So I'm obsessed with failure.
That's the whole thing. It's as long as, and this is the thing where the fear of failure comes in, right? As long as you learn from that failure and you don't repeat it, right? So one of the things that I've loved to do at Shopify as well, when I encourage our teams to fail, in my weekly team meetings, we have something where actually I ask everyone to share a failure, right? But what you're going to do is share what did you learn from it. So what can we all learn from it to make sure that we don't do that? Great, now let's go out and discover a different way of doing things.
And I learned that, so organizations tend to think failing is the risk, right? And I had this really interesting experience where there's this family-owned brand in the UK that's worth billions. You'll all know it. I won't say the name because I'm about to disparage one of them. So they own two brands within the group, right? Brand A, Brand B. I worked with both of them for many, many years, 5 years. Some days I was in their office 4 days a week. I went to their birthdays in Singapore. I was always with them, right? Brand A was run by the son. Brand B was run by the father. Very different approaches to innovation, very different systems in the company for sign-off. If I took an idea to Brand A, if I said we figured out how on TikTok to make the live streams change in real time so you can sell whatever, the son would go and he would call the team in and say, we're going to do this now. We wouldn't even have a contract. We never had a contract with this brand, and they paid us millions and millions. We're going to do this now. Right? We'd get on with the experiment, succeed or fail, let's just say it failed, fine, we move on to the next thing. If I take that same idea to the dad, it's another $1 billion brand, 9 months deciding whether we should give it a go. The difference, the cost, the risk isn't the failed experiment, it's the time you lose. And perfect decisions only exist in hindsight. This guy, the son, beat the dad's business. It overtook the business. And I saw and watched how, because he was conducting experiments and finding the correct answer, and sometimes the wrong answer, at a rate of 10x his father. And I met with, how do I say this without name dropping? Obama was in Brazil and I spoke on the same stage. And one of the things he said was that when he went after Osama bin Laden in that compound in Pakistan, he goes, you never have 100% certainty. The cost is also always hesitation. We had 51% certainty Osama was in that thing. And what I do is I get to peace at 51% and I go for it. Because the delay, as I see in these organizations that used to go bust as they were considering an idea that we'd brought to them, Kath Kidson was one of them, the delay is the risk. The lack of conviction, the hesitation, not the failure. So, yeah.
What the son understood is that there's very few things in life that are two-way doors, right? You go out, if it doesn't work, you walk back in.
Exactly.
The father was treating everything like it's a one-way door.
Exactly.
Right? And like we have to remember, I think particularly as business people, like there's almost nothing that we do that isn't a two-way door. Give it a try, don't waste time, be decisive about it. If it doesn't work, you pivot on to the next thing.
Amen.
This is like the best word association game I've ever played, where we've started with the economy and we've ended with Obama. This is.
Speaking of Michelle.
I mean, I'm trying to reassess my brain here. We're talking a lot about these kind of big ships that take a long time to turn. It's something we see day to day as an agency, Jason. We sometimes see it with small brands as well, to be honest with you, who are adopting big brand mentality. how do you, as the kind of CEO of the business, how do you work with those bigger brands to get them to turn quicker, to get them to kind of adjust their approach?
I guess it's outlining opportunity. I mean, Stephen, you've mentioned this a few times. When it comes to brands that don't execute quickly enough, they end up disappearing. Blockbuster is probably a good example of a business that didn't really evolve their business, that had so many chances to do this, and didn't really want to know, and then all of a sudden Netflix and streaming and pop. We've been working with a big car company at the moment, and they've been pivoting, wanting to take more away from the dealership network and more ownership of the direct-to-consumer themselves, more ownership of the actual relationship that they've got with their consumers. And I guess for anybody that runs a brand, where are your customers? How do you interact with them on the platforms that they're going to be on? For this car manufacturer, they wanted to make it as simple as possible for their customers to be able to order parts or accessories on a mobile, on an app, with a VIN number, putting it in, rather than having to have the process of going to a dealership, getting the dealership having to order it, waiting for that to turn up. Yes, it's turned up. That's such an archaic way of doing things. A lot of brands are going through this digital transformation piece, and one thing that Shopify's just released, I'm going to name drop a really nice feature, is the B2B side of the offering. We're dealing with a lot of B2B companies at the moment that are now seriously considering Shopify, and they're very large companies. We started working with Shopify 10 years ago, and the brands that were on Shopify then, I think it was about 20,000 merchants, and very smaller retailers. Now there's huge companies that are considering Shopify's kind of platform and capabilities, and B2B is growing so quickly. They've got big businesses at the moment that are effectively warehouses of stock, and they're now considering going direct to consumer. They're now considering taking their stock and actually having the relationship with the customers rather than selling it to distributors or selling it to stores. They're like, how do we get a piece of this? So there's lots of businesses, I think, taking up and identifying opportunities within the marketplace and using technology that's enabling that.
I think that's really interesting, because automotive is particularly bad for this. It's a slightly different thing, but ultimately it's the same as what we've been talking about in terms of ownership of your data, right? Automotive have given the power over to a third party in terms of dealership networks, and now they're feeling the pinch because they don't own that relationship with their customers. And then you get the likes of Tesla roll in and say, you can order this car online in 5 clicks and it's done. It seems so simple, right? You limit your options.
Did you do that with your Tesla?
Jason's favourite thing is to mention that I drive a Tesla. Yes, I did. I ordered it online. I was that arrogant person that didn't even do a test drive. But yeah, they make it so easy to do that. But it's unheard of in the automotive industry. And I think, we're talking about undoing technical debt, and we're talking about organisational change. But automotive is going to be one of the most challenging to do that, because they've conceded so much power to their dealership networks. And if anyone's ever worked with automotive, it's fairly challenging to get those ideas through. Leo, in terms of your experiences when you're working with businesses, I'm going to go back to this kind of organisational change and these challenges that you have in terms of how to fundamentally change how the business thinks. How are you seeing the people that are coming to you? How are you seeing them dealing with that?
Yeah, I'll give you an example. Earlier this week, I was having a conversation with our director of sales where he was telling me about this deal that he was working on with credit. Credit was given pushback because we saw a dip in sales, right? So they were concerned about the margin compression on the business, their debt serviceability, right? So we go back to the client, have the conversation with them, and they said, listen, they brought up a spreadsheet for us, and they said, here's where we are now, right? So for the past year to 18 months, they've basically been in high growth gear, right? And so now they're basically downshifting, right? So they have levers that they can pull very quickly to be able to reduce expenses of the business, increase profitability, even in a downturn market, right? So I think businesses that are able to stress test, right? So play out stress scenarios. So, the old adage of, preparing for the worst, hoping for the best, right? So being able to design your business in a way where it's nimble, and you're able to pull certain levers, what levers you can pull to kind of take the foot off the gas a little bit, reposition yourself, right, in a way where you're still, I guess, in the game, let's say, so to speak, and you can just, position yourself. Because I think in this environment, it also creates opportunity, right? So if you're potentially struggling, your competitors are potentially struggling as well, right? So how do you take advantage of that? So what are parts of your business that, yeah, maybe you have to be a little leaner on, but what are other parts where you can double down on, right? Really take advantage of the opportunity that's in front of you, which is a hard thing to do in an uncertain environment, right? And I'll kind of leave that to the other experts on the panel to advise folks on. But yeah, I think it's really about, planning, preparing for the worst, and being nimble and I think light-footed to be able to position yourself with the current environment.
Perfect. Paul, your Ernst & Young is kind of, if we were to put columns in place, you'd be on the kind of traditional side of business. Are you seeing that bigger businesses are being challenged by disruptors in the market, that you're seeing that they're having to think differently? Are you seeing them have those challenges of how they turn things around?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, especially the legacy players that have had it good for a long time, I think that no longer do we need to just compete for share of wallet, we've got to compete for share of mind, or increasingly share of heart. So there's lots of people disrupting established markets, especially the people, maybe there's some in the room who are digitally native and more nimble. So I think that the barriers are lower in many markets. So people are coming in and being far more active on things like social media. So getting people to be able to change the way they operate and repurpose their op model to be able to get finance and benefit from different parts of their business is a bit of a challenge. I think what Stephen said earlier about the fortitude you need to be able to do that. We work quite closely with a large furniture manufacturer and retailer.
Not everyone can just hint at the name.
We were talking for a long time about the importance of customer experience. So somebody who's emotionally invested in your brand is going to spend twice as much as somebody who's just merely satisfied with it. So getting, and we all know the cost of acquisition these days. So if you keep somebody delighted, they're far more likely to be able to repeat purchase and obviously becoming an advocate of yours. But trying to get that customer experience manifesto embedded into their business right up into the sort of C-suite. Interesting conversations, but didn't really sink in. But when the chief exec had it as a mission and a mantra, and then sort of filtered it right through the business, that's when they completely transformed. And the only score that they cared about, the only KPI they wanted, was customer happiness.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to me that advocacy is kind of being presented as this new and magical thing that people are doing, and that it comes at the end of the process, right? You get them, you kind of push them through a sales funnel, you put loads of people in the top, and then at the bottom, some people come out, and then at some point you figure out how to make them advocates. But advocacy it starts at the beginning, right? It starts with values, it starts with people resonating with who you are. I mean, Huel's a good example of this. I always use Huel as an example because I once spilt Huel all over all of my stuff in my bag and immediately tweeted about it, as you do. And they sent me like just a bundle. Like it wasn't their problem to solve at all. But I've talked about it here, I've written blogs about it. I talk about it all the time. This tiny moment of delight that they managed to do on Twitter by just sending me stuff that was probably cost them like 20 quid or something, if that. But I talk about it all the time now. Advocacy, if you're selling on functions and features, right, you're going to lose out to the next cheaper person or the next person with deeper pockets. How do you embed that advocacy piece into the very beginning of the user journey?
Yeah, I love the question, and I love the example of Huel because they really care about it. But I'm going to give you a few examples of like embedding advocacy, even into the wrapper. Coca-Cola's Share a Coke campaign. They put your name on a can of Coke, and it's one of the most successful campaigns they've ever done. You, because you saw your name on a fairly iconic brand, would uploaded that Coke can or that Coke bottle at an unbelievable rate, just because they sort of tickled your sense of identity. Starbucks, they write your name on the coffee cup. That is probably their best driver of UGC or people advocating on social media about the product. And if they spell your name wrong, you've got even more of a story to tell all of your friends that you're a Starbucks person. Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
but
there's
an art to it. There's an art to it because that's enabling you to have a story to tell your friends that you are a Starbucks person. Now, if I remove the Starbucks brand and put in a brand that people don't really think of as being, aspirational or whatever, you wouldn't do it regardless of whether it had your name on it or not. And then I'll give another example of when I flew to India, landed in India. This is before Dragon's Den, the podcast. You know, I was just running my business. It was a small business at the time. I land in this hotel in India, get to my hotel room, go into the door. I did have so the context, I had a big following at the time on Instagram in particular. Got to my room and there's a chocolate Taj Mahal with a little rice paper sticker of my company logo on it. I'm freaking out. I'm in India. And they've put this little rice paper sticker on this chocolate Taj Mahal. I get my phone out so fast to brag to my friends that I'm important in India. And think about that. Millions of people found out about this hotel, and it cost them a rice paper sticker because they tickled my ego. And how simple that was. And so with that front of mind, when I released my book, you know, we want to get all the big influencers talking about my book and advocating about it. So I got a box. The book is called Happy Sexy Millionaire, long story. I got a box. I thought, we'll get dollar bills and we'll put the influencer's face on a big pile of dollar bills and we'll send it to the house with the book on top that says Happy Sexy Millionaire. Of the 700 boxes we sent out, 630 of the influencers posted it. Not just that, other influencers who had seen the box and wanted someone to send them their face on money contacted us asking if they could buy the box. We ran some numbers on it, and we're like, that's about $3 million of influencer spend. It cost us $20K to send those boxes. We appealed to their sense of identity, it's personalization, it's making the customer feel important, and it gives them a story. We're handing them the story. Oh my God, someone sent me my face on money? You got one. And did you post it? Thank you. And so we think about that a lot in the customer experience. Personalization is an unbelievable, thing to do, but yeah.
Nice. I think we should let you guys ask some questions. I think we've got some microphones. Have we got some microphones around just so? I mean, you're right at the front, so we can hear you. I'll repeat it.
So, first of all, I think it's really interesting. I love the whole kind of sense of optimism, like our brand's tagline is "What Brighter." Just flipping that for a second, I guess the question is more professional, but you can answer it personally if you want. And I'd love to go through everyone if possible very quickly. What is keeping you guys awake at night at the moment? And what's the one line of what you're thinking about in terms of approaching that in a way that's going to make you sleep better? And I'd love to do that quickly through everyone if that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, what's keeping me? I've got a 2-year-old daughter. She's got a bad cough. That's not even a joke, guys. I don't know. It's very sleep deprived. What's keeping you awake at night, Stephen?
Nothing. And I was trying to think of an answer, and the truth is nothing keeps me awake at night. Sleep is, and I wear this and I'm obsessed with my sleep, but just generally I don't worry about those things. I'm obsessed with what I can control and I don't worry about the things that I can't. So nothing right now.
Jace?
I'm on a bit of a mission of, redefining the agency a little bit. We scaled really quickly over the pandemic period, and built a management structure and have a big team now, and lost a little bit of who we were, a little bit of the quality that we were delivering on, as we've scaled. So over the last few weeks, we've been having cross-agency calls every morning to kind of go through some of the stuff Stephen said, where it was like, right, okay, how do we lean into some of the failures and how do we lean into the successes and, how do we celebrate that and work as a collective to fix that. So it's been that was niggling at me, that was kind of keeping me up, and now I feel that we've got a way forward to really address that. Sleeping a bit better.
Shimona?
We went through a shit ton of growth through COVID. Right before COVID, Shopify was about 13 years old. It took us about 13 years to get to our first 1 million merchants. And we more than doubled that 18 months later. That's the kind of ridiculous growth we dealt with. But with growth comes a lot of those challenges, right? And some of those challenges are happening right now as we see a little bit of a contraction of the economy and of the space for a time being. So the number one thing actually that's keeping me up is how do I make sure that we're caring for our people? Because our teams are the ones that are actually talking to all of you every single day. So how do I make sure that I'm building an organization and a team and an environment where they feel like they can show up, they feel engaged, they still feel passionate about the work they're involved in because they're the ones that are serving all of you. And the thing that's most important for the next 12 months is that we continue to show up for small and medium and large businesses for the next 12 months. That is literally our mission, right, is to make commerce better, to remove roadblocks from all of your ability to succeed. I have to start by making sure that my teams are taken care of. So, and that's the thing. It's been a tough year. And I know it's going to be a little bit hard for the next 12 months, but the number one thing I'm focused on is caring for our people.
Leah?
Not to steal part of your answer, Shimona, but I was going to say growth, continued growth for us. Again, I'm with SellersFunding, so we're a digital financial platform for e-com. A lot has changed in our space, I think even in the matter of the past couple of months. So the competitive landscape has changed completely, and so we're still a relatively small company, I think, especially compared to some of the heavyweights that I'm sitting here on the panel with. So I think for us, it's just, how do we get our name out there, right? And because we know from the top down that we offer a differentiated solution. I think that's why we're still around when some other folks aren't, and we can add true value to businesses. So, how do we continue to get that brand exposure, get our name out there, get in front of brands and support them, right? And be a long-term growth partner of theirs. Doing things like this is one of those ways. So appreciate it, guys.
Cool.
Okay, so we're approaching peak trading for a lot of our clients. So what keeps me awake at night, not quite awake, but what sort of keeps me thinking is how can I get my clients to trust me and trust us that the path we've set is right, especially as we're facing into fairly uncertain times. Yeah. Stay the course, embrace risk, and stop thinking about the way in which we've always done things in these sort of promotional cycles about driving a fairly artificial peak in our trading calendar and doing something which is more of a sort of always on experience that's more authentic to the people that we should be attracting.
I think the daunting thing, certainly about e-com and digital in general, is that it just never ends, right? I'm quite afraid of like print and traditional media because once it's done, and when there's a spelling mistake, you have to reprint those 10,000 brochures or whatever. It's the exciting thing about digital, but it's not a good space to be in if you are not comfortable with everything changing all the time and there never being an endpoint. You are always working towards something that is just in front of you, and often you have to look back to realize what you've achieved because you're in this constant cycle. But I think the main point we've got out of this is Stephen's the only one that's sleeping well.
Because I heard it literally. I heard like what's actually keeping you awake. And do you know what? If you'd asked me a couple of years ago, everything was keeping me awake. In the height of being the CEO of this big company that had cash flow issues every month, everything was keeping me awake. But where things are right now, and with the way that I've kind of honestly like readjusted my life to prioritize balance over everything, my health, my balance, my relationship with my partner over everything, the balance has allowed me to be much more calm.
I think it's really interesting yourself. I think it's a really, really important thing to note because I followed Social Chain, from before the book and the podcast and all that stuff. And from the outside, and this is typical of everything, right? From the outside, it was like, these guys are just flying. So just honestly, for me to hear you go, there were cash flow issues and we had problems. And,
oh my God, if I could, I've got so many stories that I'd run out of time telling you that it felt like every month, every moment of every day, we were like on the edge of the cliff. And to the point that my business partner, Dom, as he's come out and said very publicly, I'd find him in the room downstairs. We lived in the same house, drinking from a whiskey bottle at 3 a.m. in the morning. I didn't know what alcoholism was, but he was a full-blown alcoholic. Not just that, he was engaging in suicidal ideation. It was like constant. The difference was Dom was inside the video game and I was holding the controller. So I was still managing to go home and kind of just phase out and pretend that we had enough money to make payday tomorrow for 400, 500, 600 people, even though we didn't. And when that happens once, it's okay, you can get over it. When that happens like 12 or 13 months, where it's payday this week, I look up from my desk, everyone's it's Friday, so it's payday today, and they are just preparing to party tonight. And I'm thinking, we haven't got the money in the bank. We never miss payday ever, but some of the stories I could tell you about, my favorite story, I got one where we couldn't pay people unless this hashtag trended. I can tell you now, because I'm outside the business. I went to Badoo, the dating app, and said, listen, I'd gone down there and made a deal with the CEO. He obviously didn't know we had cash flow issues. I said, the campaign's, this was when we were early, the campaign's 30K, but can we put a bonus clause in? If I make you trend #1 on Twitter, you pay 90 grand within 24 hours. He was like, yeah. He was one of those people that just kind of signs up. He signed it off. We're all in the room. I'm fucking got my fingers crossed, looking at Twitter's trending topics. At this time, there was like 20 people in my company. And I'm waiting for it to trend. And then when it trends, I'm on the phone like, But the other example was when there was hundreds of people in NatWest, our bank wouldn't release the cash. It's Friday, it's Thursday, it's payday at midnight. And I'm at a talk in London to one of our biggest clients in the world called Imperial Brands at the time, the blue vape thing. And I realized that unless we get someone in this audience in the next 3 hours to sign a contract that I'm about to pull out on my phone, which is worth $4 million, right? My team aren't getting paid in Manchester. So I've got this WhatsApp group of our finance team saying, Natalie at the bank has said, if you can get that contract signed today by a client, today, while I'm in this room doing this talk, then they'll release the funds, and NatWest release the funds to our account, and we can pay our team. So I do the talk on stage, it goes really well, and then I'm like, right, let's go to the bar. And we go to the bar, we're having a couple of drinks, that's how we're chatting about projects we're going to do, and I say, that piece of work, I just kind of need a signature now. Oh yeah, I'll sign it, Steve. We carry on having a few more drinks, and a couple of hours later, Richard, one of the guys, says, yeah, I'll pass it here, I'll sign it. Signs it, I WhatsApp it over to Dave, Dave sends it to Natalie, they release the funds, everyone gets paid. And that happened over and over. So imagine living in that state for months on end of just constant, you're on the cliff. It's not easy to have friends, to enjoy life. So I would have answered differently to kind of come back full loop, but things are a little bit better now.
Right. The good news is we have a contract for each of you.
On your way out.
And it's not 4 million, they're just 1 mil each. And as soon as they're signed, we'll open the doors. I saw another hand here. Hey, you might just need to shout.
Him or me?
Oh, in fact, someone's got a mic. I will come back to you, I promise.
Sorry, jumped in. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I want to say a massive thank you to Shopify. We launched the first at-home HIV test in 2014. No one would touch us with a barge pole, and we now have a global business. So kudos and thank you. Thank you very much. And we've done the opposite of what you've said. We've grown a really strong customer base with credibility, but through anonymity. So it's been a very opposite scenario. But we're now launching a new product that stops you from catching COVID and colds and flu. And we've got no route to market against. We have a Shopify platform, no Google access, no Facebook access, because we're profiteering from a distressing situation. So I wondered if anyone had any kind of guerrilla tactics of how we can attack this. TikTok, unfortunately, is our wrong market audience. We need the Facebook crowd, and we have a reasonable database, but we're breaking into a new market with our same brand, and we don't have many doors open, so thank you very much.
I mean, it's a really, really challenging one. I suppose essentially the question is, first of all, an amazing brand to launch, so congratulations on that. I suppose the question here is, in a restricted market where you can't just advertise on Google and Facebook and get that intent, what do you do? Stephen, do you want to go first?
Sure.
No pressure.
What's the product again? It's something that helps you with COVID.
Yeah, it's a nasal spray that stops, It's a nasal spray that basically stops you. So we could be seen as an anti-vax product, which we're not at all. We work with healthcare, we work with retail. But it's another layer of protection. But we are being blocked literally every avenue we turn on. We just can't say helps prevent, helps protect, nothing. Everything we do is being taken down, and it's like,
That's a challenging one.
Traditional advertising? Do you go back to the traditional?
I mean, they're sometimes as bad with our restrictions.
I mean, loads of random things were firing in my head, and it's hard to give specific advice when you don't understand the specific product and the challenge. I was thinking about retail as one avenue. Then I was thinking about the Avon thing model came into my head, where you get your customers to tell their friends, because if you can't use digital networks, you maybe create real life networks. And then I was thinking about guerrilla tactics in the street that might work, but then it's highly inefficient. I don't know, has anyone else got anything? If you can't use the main social channels.
If you've got...
I don't want to say Amazon either.
Is it an over-the-counter product? Is it Consumer healthcare.
Sorry, it's in healthcare, it's MHRA registered.
But is it an RX? Is it a prescription product or is it consumer healthcare? So it's consumer healthcare, yeah?
Yeah, and we have got some retailers listing. We're live until before next month, and we've got other campaigns.
Can I ask a question? It's prevention, isn't it?
Yeah, prevention is problematic.
My question would be like, how many people are interested, and who are the people, first of all, that are interested in prevention? I understand when your tyre breaks down, you call the AA, so I understand after the fact. But prevention, it'd be good to know who that audience are.
We've split our audience. We have very different audiences for our other healthcare products. We've split our audiences into me, which is the sandwich kind of generation, women in her 50s, working full time, older parents, younger kids at uni. We ain't got time to be ill. We need to protect the elders, protect the youngers. I don't use Facebook, but we are a Facebook generation, and that's blocked for us. We've a bit on Mumsnet, that kind of thing. The other target market we've got is sort of the businessmen, people who haven't got time to be ill. I think everyone's COVID bored, but it's the executive, the people who just haven't got time to be ill, not worried about being ill, but just haven't got time.
So maybe
Yeah,
we could go down a whole path of a go-to-market for her. Yeah, right. I was just going to say, I mean, so much of this, particularly I know when it comes to healthcare, are just the nuances and the loopholes of how some of these regulations are written. If you look behind you, there's two guys named Dave and Matthias, and they would love to chat with you when we're done, and we'll see if we can get you connected to some people that might know how to get around some of these things and think about your business model. How's that?
I think
Thanks,
just as a final thing from me, if you've already got an audience and you've got data, the audience that is most likely to buy your product next is probably friends with the audience that you already have. So I don't think there's a silver bullet for you here. There's probably going to be 5 or 6 things that you need to do, but certainly like heavily incentivizing people and rewarding people for being advocates of your brand is going to be a great way for you to get in front of more people. It's not quick necessarily, but it can be helpful. No worries.
Here, right?
Yes, this one. Sorry. No, that's fine. That's fine.
Thank you.
What's your business model? What shall we say?
No, it's basically, Stephen, you spoke about the struggles of being in business and kind of being like struggling to pay, people's salary and stuff like that. And just before that, we're talking a little bit about failure, and I actually think it's become a bit more of like a sexy word now in business. You kind of see it personified by like Elon Musk and his rockets blowing up and kind of that fast iteration. My question is, how do you approach failure when you're probably quite close to the whole business itself coming down and collapsing? If you've not got that lifeline, as we work into this potential recession and the contraction of funds, how do you approach failure when you might not have that lifeline to see you out of the other end if it doesn't work?
I mean, presumably, when you were at that point, you didn't have the lifeline.
Well, my first business that nobody talks about did fail, Woolpark. So I dropped out of university and started a company called Woolpark. That went on for 2 years. I raised capital about 50 grand or something, which to me was fucking euro millions. But because I was shoplifting pizzas at the time, so 50 grand was fucking.
How do you shoplift a pizza?
I can tell you after. It's not too hard. It's not as hard as it sounds. But my first business failed, and there became a point where I realized that my hypothesis for this business wasn't going to work. It was a student notice board. Essentially, it was national. And I realized, long story short, that I'd made a miscalculation about a fundamental thing that this business relied upon. And I pivoted, and that business is called Social Chain. Everyone knows that business, but nobody knows the pile of ashes that created that. So there's an honest conversation with oneself at some point about what you're doing, and it requires a huge amount of humility, which is very difficult. And then there's failure, as I've shown, it's not necessarily you falling off the branch, it can be grabbing onto another one. And I'll just, on the point of failure, because I know a lot of people will fail in their careers and their journeys as entrepreneurs, if I hadn't have done Woolpark, when I recount Woolpark, I look at my net worth and I divide it across all of those years. I say I made 10 million in those first 2 Woolpark years. I didn't get the money directly, I got it maybe 10 years later, but in those first 2 years, had I not failed so bad at trying to do this website, I came out of Woolpark earning a really significant amount of money, but with a skill set that the world absolutely needed. That skill set was social media. That built a business that generates 700 million or whatever it is this year. So that, you know, and I have that relationship with failure, that it is feedback, and I think if you fail young especially, if you can fail in really important industries like Web3 now, if you can fail quickly, you'll be set for life regardless of the outcome of your whatever project. I'm encouraging at this moment every young person I meet to go and, I literally will say, go and fail in Web3, because you'll do 2 years of fucking around and learning some stuff, and then the world, the demand for that talent, that experience will be insane. So, yeah.
I mean, I know you asked Stephen the question, but Jason, knowing your kind of story, you've built a number of businesses, and when you built Eastside as an agency, you know, there's a story of you coming to Birmingham, the typical coming to Birmingham with £5 in your pocket. I don't think many people come to Birmingham, but you know, coming with a fairly small amount and then having to build a business. So presumably in that time you've also had to face failure, and is it the same thing for you? All of those experiences built into what created Eastside? Yeah,
I mean, Stephen's story resonates massively. Literally sitting here listening, I'm like, all right, okay.
You did a student export?
No, the cash flow issues, the running a business, the dealing with payroll at the end of the month, the needing to close this client to make sure we're all good. I mean, what was the specific question again, so I can try and give you a really succinct answer?
So how do you approach failure or failing when you don't have a lifeline? When there isn't, the comparison of like Elon Musk, who, if he fails at Twitter, will probably be all right. It
is taking things as an experience. Whether that's failing within something within the business or failing in the business in its entirety. I've got a few failed businesses before as well, and it's, I wouldn't be able to do what I do, again, like Stephen said, without going through that experience and failing forward, learning from it. Not everything you do is going to work. Not everything you do in life is not going to work. Not every relationship you're in is going to work out. You learn from it and you move on.
There's like, what I found a more succinct way to answer. There's basically like 5 buckets you're pouring into in your life. One of them is your network, who you know. One of them is what you know, your knowledge. The other one is your skills. The other one is your reputation. And then the last one is your resources. And if you ask yourself in the course of that failure, how much you poured into those 5 buckets, it's tremendous. And this is what I used to think when I was young. I used to sit there in my room and think, well, if I didn't build this website and I just went to Africa, back to where I was born in Botswana, and just saved one life, would it be more worthwhile than building a business for myself to enrich myself? And then that's when I started thinking about these 5 things. Well, if I pour into these 5 buckets for the next 10 years, regardless, imagine all the things I'll be able to do in Africa. That's what I used to think. Imagine how many lives. And that's what I did. I poured into those buckets for 10 years. And now if you reflect on my network, what I know, my skills, ability to speak, raise capital, my resources and my reputation, because of failure, it's a superpower to have full buckets. And so, and then the last point is just knowing when to quit. Because quitting is such a stigmatized thing, but my God, quitting is the unbelievably important, necessary thing we have to do before we start. So if we glamorize starting, we have to glamorize quitting in the same regard. Quitting is a skill that the most successful people in the world that I've ever met have mastered. Knowing when to let go of that branch and grab hold of the next one. And I've quit throughout my life, school, university, Wall Park, social chain. There's one missing one there. Yeah, Wall Park, social chain, yeah. Quit all of them out of the blue because the time had come. So, yeah.
Great. Sorry, I'll come to you next, I promise. Hi.
My name's Jen. I run the essentially-based brand Better Loves. Been a Shopify merchant for the last 6 years, so thank you. I guess, in a year where I've seen lots of sort of small business friends have to close their doors, and obviously we're sat here today talking about larger brands that were considered very solid and stable closing. What advice would you give to those of us who are able to sort of survive Q4, particularly Shimona, with your insight around potentially consumers holding up their spending this quarter with a view to reduce spend next year? What advice would you give for those of us who can survive Q4 to surviving Q1?
Yeah. What I've been talking to merchants about most, and I think this is probably true for a lot of people who are getting ready maybe for the next 12 or 18 months, is to pick a few bets and to really focus, right? Like what we've seen, particularly for the last, 2 to 3 years, has been a whole lot of like just feasting in many cases and almost like growth at all costs, right? And we just need to rein that in a little bit. Be a little bit smarter, be focused, take a bet, be optimistic, but get focused, right? And ensure that we're looking at, like, do things well and efficiently. And when you're gonna take a bet, you're gonna take a risk, understand how you're gonna measure success. What are you gonna learn? When you learning how to pivot quickly, right? Before you sink in too far. So like most merchants that I'm watching right now, as successful as they may have been in the last couple of years, are just reining in maybe the number of bets they're doing, and they're going all in a few areas in order to remain focused, right? That way they're managing their costs, but they're ensuring that whatever they're doing well, and they're looking at automating, of course, as much as possible, right? So again, it's about all of that efficiency. What do I take off my plate? What do I hand to technology? What do I automate, and how do I make sure I'm focusing on things, right? So it might not be for next year that you're, doing brand extensions and international expansion, and a couple of new channels and all the things. Maybe what you're going to do is focus on the brand extension and winning your customers at home and extending the lifetime value. So all of those things are, I'd say, is where everyone's really focusing in. And so then I come back again to, if we know people are going to be reducing spending, really build deeply that relationship with your existing customer, right? Focus on the existing customers, that connect to consumer that's really going to drive the next few years. And make sure that you're focusing everywhere you can on extending that relationship.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm going to take one more question very, very quickly. I'm sorry, I think you did have your hand up. Go ahead.
Stephen, I wanted to ask you, how do you train your brain? What do you do to become to stay hyper-focused? I know one thing from your book, which you said about gratitude, right? What would be the other?
I think it's important to know that I don't stay hyper-focused. I procrastinate, I'm a mess, I go down YouTube rabbit holes like everybody else. And like when I read about these successful people in these books and they say, I jump up at 5 a.m., green juice yoga, spin around, tap my head, I can't relate. I will wake up when my body wakes me up, and I just hope I'm not late most of the time. I'm a real mess, and I think that's okay. It's gone okay so far. So I'm not into how do I stay focused? At this stage in my career, it's really about understanding time is the only currency I and all of you are playing with. And in my book, I use the analogy of, well, I'm a little bit on the side, but you all get 24 hours in a day. You get these 24 chips given to you every single day. And how you place those chips on the roulette table of life, and when the wheel spins, determines all of your outcomes across your health, relationships, professions, everything, your relationship with your dog, how and where you place those chips. So this is this real focus that my time is the center point of my influence on the entirety of my life and all of those around me has meant that I'm incredibly focused on saying no to pretty much everything. Honestly, you wouldn't believe. Wakanda, Black Panther, Premiere, you want to come down? No.
I'm happy to take
it's not, yeah. And I've got this set of priorities which help me place my chip. Health is number one, and that incorporates nutrition, sleep, and all those things, mental health. That's number one, because if I lose that, I lose everything I'm about to say. Number two is my relationships. If I lose my health, I forget my dog and my girlfriend and my family. It's all gone. Number two is my meaningful relationships. Number three, I would say, is my sense of purpose and pursuit, again, incredibly important. And then number four would be my play. That's like watching Manchester United tonight when I'm out of there, because they're playing, and learning to DJ and that kind of thing, in that order.
One more question.
I'm really sorry. I think we've run out of time. Mandy's looking at me like I've stolen something away from her. I think we'll call it there. I'm sorry, guys. I'm just aware of the time. I'd just like to thank, first of all, I'd like to thank SellersFunding, who have, and Leo for being on stage. They've supported us in putting this event together, helped us massively. So really, really grateful to the guys at SellersFunding. Of course, the rest of the panel, Paul from Ernst Young, Shimona, you've been absolutely phenomenal from Shopify. Jason, of course, thank you to you. Jason is the CEO of Eastside Co and has forced me to say all these nice things about him in order to retain my position. But no, it wouldn't be possible without Jason. So again, very much appreciate and all the insight you've given today. Thank you so much. Was there? Oh, no. And of course, the reason that I'm sure so many of you have come today are just so grateful to have Stephen here with us to give us the insights. It's, I'm sure many of you have seen the talks on social media. I'm sure many of you have read the book, watched the podcast. I know we all have on stage, so I'm very grateful to you. Thank you so much for your insight. I really appreciate it. Thank you. And of course, thank you to all of you wonderful people for turning up. You've actually braved real life. Congratulations. You've walked out in the streets and seen people physically. There's multiple people I've seen here today that I've never seen in a 3D format. I've only seen them over a screen. So thank you all so much for coming. There'll be a couple of us hanging around, so please feel free to grab us and ask us questions and talk to us. Thank you so much. Give yourselves a round of applause. Oh, sorry, wait. Sorry. There's one more person. Mandy here, who you see standing on the side, looking absolutely wonderful, has done a phenomenal job of helping us organise this and stressing about all of the changes that you guys wanted to make last minute about swapping tickets and can this person come and can we have this person in, please? That's Mandy and Matt Allen and Georgia at the back of the room there from Eastside Co. Thank you so much to these guys. Okay, stop that there, stop. We can't clap too long for them because the egos expand very quickly. Listen, there's a bunch of people from all of the companies that are on stage today, so please go and speak to them. Enjoy a few drinks. We have a little bit of time here, I believe. Thank you all so much again, and enjoy the rest of your evenings. And thank you so much.